Hi, this is From My Geology to Unity. And today I'm interviewing Viccy Lynn. So, yeah, she's got a YouTube channel called Viccy Lynn Chan. She channels light language, and I'm really glad to talk to her. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me, Nick.
Well, I'm excited. So, how did you discover your gifts then?
I have to go back and share a story if that's okay. Um, so it actually is related to an interdimensional being contact. Um, I had a visitation in my room a few years ago, and it like totally turned my world upside down. I wasn't expecting something like this. And it ended up taking me on a trip where I met a Native American woman. And I needed somebody to share this experience with because the people that were around me just weren't really open to this at all. And I started asking her about it. And in their culture, they have a lot of stories about star people, right? And she wasn't shocked at all about this. And she started to ask me if I wanted to receive a channeled message. So I was like, okay, sure, why not? And that was the very, very first time I've ever heard light language. I didn't even know there was such a thing. And when I heard her speak it, it was so foreign, yet so beautiful. And it really resonated something deeply inside of me. Afterwards, she said that, you can do this yourself. You don't really need to seek somebody else to do it. You just have to remember who you are and uh, remember these things, these gifts and talents that you hold inside of you. So she showed me something, little exercise just to open up the heart chakra. And when I went home after my trip, I did it while I was sun gazing and with my feet grounded onto the earth, and it came out just like that. So I think it was ready to be expressed. I just needed that little push and that little nudge for it to come out.
Were you already into spirituality at that point?
Um, I mean, I would like read up on some of the stuff and would meditate, do yoga and all that, but I didn't really learn about anything in depth. So after it came through, that's when I started really going down the rabbit hole and sort of exploring a lot more just to understand what had happened to me and what was coming through me.
So, your visitation in your room, was that an energetic visitation, or was it, what form did it take?
Uh it's very hard to describe because I think so. It was a bit of both. So it is energetic, but it's almost like you're in that astral realm, right? So um, it's like that in between state you feel when you wake up in the morning just before you are fully conscious. And so you're very well of your surroundings, but you're also still in that altered state of consciousness.
Okay. And what did they look like?
They are so they're the actual being itself was just glowing with light, pearly white skin, um, had a humanoid form, um, and it was just like this shape of a human being. That's really how I could with eyes and like a funny shaped head. Not so much like yours and mine, but a little bit just bigger. And that being came just to give me a message. That experience wasn't what initiated me, like activated my ability to speak and sing in light language, but it led me down a path that brought that forth.
So you weren't scared.
Oh, I was very scared. I was very scared. Actually, the only response I had was actually fear because I felt like I was like, your whole world's and everything that you understand reality to be is suddenly crashing down on you and you it's hard to kind of wrap your mind around it. So yes, I had totally fear. I was afraid that this being was actually harmful. But yet I just wanted to communicate it, but I communicate with it, but yet I couldn't because I was so overwhelmed with fear.
I don't know why. I do feel like sharing something myself. It's not, I don't know what nature it is really. I was lying in bed. I think I was half asleep. Maybe I don't know, maybe I was not even asleep at all. But there was this glowing orb appeared in the room. And it was there for like a second or two. I don't know. And then suddenly it just shot right into me. And then it was like nothing had happened. I was like, okay. And then when I went to sleep, I can't remember what it was, but I seemed to have some sort of almost like an initiation dream or like some sort of I've had a number of weird dreams, so I don't know which one was after which occasion, but I don't think I've had any physical experiences. But I do think apparently some light workers or starseeds, like in their sleep, they get taken to ship and given a sort of almost medical examination and brought back down, and they don't even have any memory of it. So you never know, do you?
Yeah, actually, that is very true. A lot of people have these experiences, and not all of it's going to be remembered consciously, but it is in our subconscious. So sometimes people will go under hypnosis and they'll remember these things, or they'll go into meditation or do some sort of soul journey, and these memories will start coming back. But what you described is actually very, very common. And I would say that experience is a very real experience for you.
Okay then. Yeah. So it's just the way you described them glowing, and I saw it in my mind's eye, and I don't know. I have no idea if what I saw in my mind's eye is what you saw. It might be, it might not. Um, but that's quite interesting.
I think it's
So,
very similar, actually, what you describe. Um, so I'll kind of elaborate on my story a little bit more, which is related to what you said. After I had that experience for a week, I was very altered by that, physically as well, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and had a heightened sense of, I guess, what people call ESP, extrasensory abilities, perception, and I would be able to feel these beings following me everywhere I went. So if I went to work, if I was walking on the street, and at night in the middle of the dark, when all the lights was out, I could feel these two beings standing in my room, and I got very scared. And I don't think it was on the sixth or seventh night. I was like, I can't take this anymore. Like, I'm so afraid I can't even get out of bed to go to the bathroom. So I just sat up and I was really horrified by this whole experience. And I started to cry, and I just out loud said, I don't know what you want to tell me or what you want from me, but whatever it is, I need you to take it slow because I can't take this. I can't handle this. Right that very moment, my vision just sort of changed a little bit. And I saw these orbs, just exactly what you described, flying all around my room. And they came up to my face and they were so beautiful, so pretty. And they would just kind of brush up against my cheek like they were kissing me. And because it was so beautiful, yeah. And because they were so beautiful and so gentle and so loving, I stopped crying. I didn't feel any fear. And then I went to sleep. But I had a very vivid dream that very, like right after. And I remembered the dream in the morning, even though it was several hours later. And they took me into this other place, this world, and they showed me how I could heal with my hands. So I think that story is so much related to what you talked about and what you shared.
huh. Yeah, I had something else I was going to share, but I forgot what it was. So never mind. But yeah. So I think we went off track, but it wasn't really off track at all. Uh, so, well, what's next in terms of you actually trying out light language, and
Mhm.
what
Yes.
process did you go from raw, unexperienced to?
Absolutely. So the funny thing is, like, there's no manual that comes with this. So when I started speaking it, it wasn't like I could go buy a book or, you know, take a course that would tell me what exactly I was doing, what was happening, how I was supposed to use it, who was I was supposed to help with it. So I had to figure it all on my own. And I did that mostly through just playing around with it, like experimenting, trying it on myself, on friends, if they were willing participants, just to see what it can do. And, um, and then I started to slowly find other people that would also be able to speak light language and just sort of learn from each other. But it's a very like individual journey. But I actually ended up mostly using it on myself to heal myself, and that's how I figured out how I'm supposed to use my version of it. I think everybody who speaks it, the purpose behind it is a little bit different, and not everybody's language is meant to do the same thing. It can do so many different things, and that's why it's so great to have so many people sharing their light language.
I think your light language is great for making me fall asleep.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad. I feel like for me, it's more to calm down the nervous system. So for anxiety, for sleep, it's really helpful to bring a sense of peace.
Hmm. But I think that's the biggest thing, like that leads you to, well, there's like self-inquiry and awareness about like reality being one of everything. But then also there's just calming down the mind.
Mm.
That is what leads to the heart opening, right? I think. From my experience, that's what you get with meditation and all of these things. I just meditate to your music. Um, so how do you know if you're doing light language or doing some sort of facsimile of it?
I would say it's a feeling. So when it comes to light language, even to understand it, it's all about intuition. And it kind of connects to what you say, which is to open your heart and feel, right? So to know whether, well, sometimes people are saying, oh, you're just speaking gibberish, or you're just like yapping in some randomness. And I mean, I can understand why people would say that, but it's the feeling I get behind it that I can tell that it's something more than that.
I've experimented with writing it. Um, I mean, there's something kind of freeing about it. This idea of like you're not thinking through what swipe or whatever you're going to do next, but there's a little bit. That's a tiny bit of like forethought or something, but the smallest amount. Um, but I saw it once, just clairvoyantly the other day. I was meditating. I think maybe it was one of your things, but I'm not sure. And then suddenly I saw these symbols just at the top left of my vision, like overlaying it, and it was like it's like almost in a almost whitish color, like not wasn't that distinct, but it was like this semicircle, but it's kind of flattened semicircles with dots on top of them,
Mhm.
or with circles on top of them. But it doesn't have a particular meaning, does it? Because it's I don't know why I'm saying that really, but yeah, it's really interesting. But so you've just got to trust it, I
Mhm.
suppose, rather than second guessing it.
Yes, because when it's very normal for us as human beings to second guess ourselves. Um, but that's the process of developing our spirituality, right? And getting in touch with our soul. We're so left brain oriented. I think it's left brain, right? That's the math and
Yes.
the logic and the rationality, that we become so dominant in that we rely on that very greatly. I think light language, creativity, music, art, it's shifting us more to becoming right brain oriented. And in
Allowing.
that, yes, in that process, it's going to be a little uncomfortable where we do doubt ourselves, and we question what's coming through us. But that's totally normal. And to just keep going. If it feels good, it feels right, then just keep developing it. And when it gets stronger, the point is not to become totally right brain dominant, but to have a balance between the left and the right, so that you do have that creativity come through, but yet there's still some sort of thought that shapes it. The consciousness still shapes it, and that's what gives it its power.
So that relates to sort of what's it called, hemisync, or the brain, left brain, right brain synchronization. That's something to do with the Kundalini awakening. I don't know the intricacies of it. There is actually a CIA report on it, even hemisync. That's quite interesting. But
Hmm.
another key issue in spirituality and a block you can encounter, I've definitely encountered this, is this left brain self criticizing not enoughness, this inner critic, like where you're trying to be spiritual in a left brain way. You're like, what is it that I should do? And you're thinking of like what might go wrong if you don't do it. And like, or am I behind? Which is this idea that I've had anyway, because I realized it's like I had that before spirituality, trying to like the sense that everyone else had it together and I didn't. But then it's like you just transfer that into spirituality, and it's like I guess it's all part of the process, though. It's There's nothing wrong with that because that's part of it. Part of
Yeah,
it, yeah. You allow the left brain, and that's how you step out of the left brain. I think that makes sense.
absolutely. Because
Yeah,
yeah, I think there's this culture in spirituality to demonize the left brain, which is also sometimes related to the ego. But to demonize something and is or to hate it, and you want to suppress it, is actually contradicting what you're actually wanting to do, which is to find balance and to accept it, right? So um, it's a process. I mean, I do it all the time, even when I speak and sing in light language. My brain is also going, hmm, is this real? Am I doing this correctly? What am I actually communicating here? So I have that just like you and just like everybody else. And it's part of the process.
is it possible that whatever makes someone's gifts, maybe, whether it's spiritual or not, because anyway, it's all spiritual anyway, because I think, yeah, I don't think it's all spiritual because there are certain gifts I had. I just got it very recently. It's a very, I'll say what it is. It's world building. It's one of the things. And it's just drawing fantasy maps and stuff like that. I did that as a kid, right? And I loved doing it and imagining these stories. I didn't write them out that much, but I imagined them, right? And I drew maps. And I always thought that it was some sort of thing that wasn't the main thing in my life. It was just something I did on the side sometimes. Turns out, like, I'm really good at it. I've got like plenty of experience at it now. And I've been trying to write a book, getting writer's block, right? Now I'm not doing it in book form. I'm shifting to a way of doing it that works for me, is more aligned with me. No writer's block. I'm
Yeah,
attached to it. But it's interesting where I've got this thought where sometimes you might discover what it is when you're older, like in your case. That is assuming you didn't do light language as a child, but or something. But sometimes you might actually know what it is, but you don't really think it's worthy because society conditions you or you buy into what you're told.
absolutely. So I thought, a few years ago when when light language started coming through me, that was the very first time. But actually, I saw this video of myself like when I was less than 2 years old. And I was actually my dad was recording a video of me playing, and I had imaginary friends. And I was speaking to these imaginary friends. But because I'm aware of light language now, when I saw that video, I knew what was happening. I knew what I was doing, and I knew who I was talking to. So, but like you said, you know, our parents, society, culture, it has a certain um it doesn't really accept these things, right? It's more, you know, again, the left brain focus sort of uh, way of life. So we get told this kind of this creative aspect of us gets sort of shut down or suppressed. And in the process of kind of remembering who we are through our spiritual development, we kind of like open that back up. But I think that everybody has it. It's just, do you remember it? Can you awaken it within you? And then, you know, but we get little clues along the way through things that we're really good at, things that we like. And that's sort of like um, a way to show you what your gifts are.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely looking back to what you love to do is a part of it. Do you interact with angels at all?
I not consciously. So like I've never had, I guess what people call archangels, you know, and these sort of beings, I've never visually seen them or had direct experiences with them in the same way I do with interdimensional beings. But my understanding is that interdimensional beings can be really anything, right? So I don't have a name for them. I just feel their energy and I bring that energy through the work that I do. And that's kind of it.
So in terms of the different types of psychic ability, it's clair feeling, whatever that word is.
Mhm.
Um, so it's not, it might be visual for you, but it's more about what's what you feel.
Yeah, so I think it's clear sentient. So it's like how it's a feeling. So some people can see, some people can hear, some people can smell, taste. For me, the strongest is to feel, and then it would be visual next. Then it would be seeing.
If I were to guess, you get an emotional cue that you feel called to do light language, and then you see in some clairvoyant way that there's a being there that in some capacity that wants to connect with you or is
Yes.
offering, and
Correct.
then there's some other clairvoyant sense, not clair sense in which you connect, or I don't know.
Yeah. That's kind of how the process works. It's always a feeling. Maybe like a feeling that I need to start singing a song or I need to just start speaking something. And I wouldn't always say that it's always a being because sometimes I feel like it's just my soul wanting to express itself. And our soul is a direct connection to source, to creation, right? To the creator. However, people want to describe it, could be God. Um, but sometimes it's not necessarily another being, but just me having that direct connection to express something from source.
So how? I mean, of course, that those two things are the same thing, really. But how do you like with my creativity? I've realized that if I just keep trying to keep going without a break, it doesn't really work so well. I need to make sure I meditate and connect and relax enough and get in the right sort of headspace. So, what's your process in preparing for it, or just maintaining your spiritual health, what have you?
For me, it's actually a little bit opposite of that. So for me, when I sing and when I speak light language and I get into that space, I could do it for hours and it feels like nothing. So sometimes I use my hands like with movement. And that's also considered light language signing, right? And I could do this for hours and I won't feel tired and it won't take a lot. I don't feel like it takes a lot of energy.
Was there ever a point where hypothetically, what if I get into a state where I'm in flow and then I come out of it somehow? But maybe when I'm more practiced, I won't come out of it. And then I come out of it, and then I'm in a sort of situation where I might force it a bit, or
Mhm.
because I'm so almost excitement, but also attachment, I guess. And that's just where I'm at. And maybe eventually I'll get to a point where it'll be like with you. But was there ever a point for you where you experience what I'm experiencing, or was it just like immediately? Yeah, how was it for you?
Yeah, you hit the word correctly. It's attachment. So I have that too. So sometimes I'll feel like, okay, it's been so long. I really need to share a song with the world, right? But I'm not feeling it, right? And I want to push it out. And
Sorry,
it
can I
just,
interrupt you?
yeah.
I keep seeing this advert. It's by these people that you can hire a car when you're on holidays, right? And they're like, "Oh, you're on holiday, but this woman's on her phone." It's like you're not feeling it, and I was like, "Oh shit!" I'm being told I'm not feeling it.
Exactly. So, um, yeah, like again, it's like we're forcing our mind into the process. But it's the, to creativity, I think is like surrendering in a way, right? You have to let go and don't have expectations and allow it to come through you. But when we try to control it, and force it, that's when it doesn't work so well. So I think really, even for me, when I let go and I don't have expectations, I'm like, okay, I feel it, let's do it. Versus, okay, right now it's been like a month and I have to sing something for people, or like to put it out there to share my work. The quality of the energy that I can produce in those two examples are so different, and I could feel it in the song. And I think other people can feel it too. So
Sometimes,
yeah.
sometimes when
So
work
I
has done
think
something.
yes, yes, exactly. So I think that creativity is always there. It's always in us. And but when we just want to make it something that it's not, that's when we feel that block.
I tried to force it just then in the conversation, and then I just let you go.
Well, I think we can all relate. I can relate to that too, because like, we're in a we have this idea of productivity. We have to produce, right? We have to produce work, we have to create stuff. And that's like this part of culture that we have to sort of like deprogram ourselves away from and just begin to allow it to come through.
So how do we deprogram ourselves?
Well, it's going to be an internal process. So it requires a person to turn their focus outwards to look at themselves internally, right? So, for example, for me, if I were to constantly want to push out a new song, even though I don't feel it, or because I feel the need to do it, to deprogram myself from that, I have to ask myself, well, why do I even want to do that? Why do I want to force it? Why do I want to push it? Why do I need to create a song? And usually, like if I go really, really deep into the core, the answer I find for me is that I always feel like I have to prove myself that I'm worthy, that I need to produce something. If I don't, then I'm considered lazy. It's a lot of these beliefs that we have about ourselves that are so ingrained in us, usually from the beginning, from childhood, all the way through culture and society. If I don't do something, then I'm not good enough. If I don't do it this way and it doesn't come out like that, I'm not I'm not worthy. And these beliefs are things that we have to deconstruct when we turn our focus inwards and look at ourselves.
Yeah, that's my experience. It always comes down to, oh, I think I'm not enough, so I need to do this to be enough. Although
Mhm.
sometimes I almost wonder if I'm like, I'm just I'm just thinking that because that's a belief I have. Like almost, I believe I'm not enough, and therefore that's the reason. It's not I have a spiritually programmed belief of what I believe, which might not be helping actually.
It's like this big
Because you
circle
need
that
to
you go
look at
in.
you look within, you look within, and maybe in a wordless way, you see if you can see it rather than being like, okay, oh yeah, I know this one. It's not being enough thing. That's why, right? Um, that's left brain spirituality.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like have you heard of this work called spiritual ego?
Oh yeah, I've got a spiritual ego. It's
Right.
actually an illusion, so I don't really.
We all have it, but it's funny because people equate ego and spirit to be like totally different things and opposite. So it's kind of like a oxymoron to have spiritual ego. But the ego, we all have it, and it's not really a bad thing. We need it to survive, to help motivate us, and to encourage us to do things and to protect us. But it likes to put meaning behind things to help boost ourselves up, right? But sometimes it could be very criticizing as well. So I think sometimes when we look at ourselves, we have to do it in a non-detached way in order to be able to identify the truth of ourselves and our reality. And when we are so ingrained in our own stories, it's very difficult to do that kind of work on ourselves.
I would only disagree in the sense that, I've come an awful, well, great way. My cat wants to come in again. He did in the last interview. But I've come quite far with those negative beliefs. And obviously you didn't mean that you can't make progress or you've got negative beliefs. So never mind. um, let's explore the ego then, because there is this attitude about the ego I've come across very recently, actually. I actually had an egoic reaction to this. So in some sense, it's mirroring, showing me something, but I just want to explore it. So you might view the ego as, well, as you ascend or as you get to high levels of consciousness, how should I put this? Your ego or you as a personality won't really have a say. You're giving it up to source and surrendering to source and letting yourself be guided by source rather than choosing your own separate, maybe even selfish sort of egoic decisions, right? But then I also have this perspective. I think that perhaps the ego is a creation of source, a higher self or soul creates this whole experience. So it's made out of source, maybe it's so in that sense, it's just like a garment. And maybe we're meant to be unconscious anyway, until we're conscious. So it's like it's all meant to happen. It's all guided. Like, I mean, yeah, we can maybe make decisions, make mistakes, but maybe not. Maybe it's all perfect. No, I don't have all the answers, obviously, but what bothered me about that idea, or at least how it came across, is it almost seemed like an attack on the ego. Or at least if it hurt my ego to hear the way it was phrased, it might hurt other people's egos. And one could just say, well, I'm not in control and I no longer make choices now, and I just let source determine everything. But I thought I was source, right? Maybe I have a spiritual ego being source, but I mean, I was going to ask you something, but I guess I'm talking. Yeah. So, what's your perspective on this?
I agree that our ego is also from a creation of source. So everything is, right? So that's why earlier I said I don't really think demonizing it is the right thing to do. It's more about keeping it in balance. So my understanding is the ego would probably be the lowest level of the mind. Okay. And then when you develop yourself, you work up the scale, and then eventually instead of operating through the ego, you do it through the higher self, the higher mind. And then when you're talking about the soul, we do have a soul. It resides in our heart, right? The heart chakra, the heart portal. And that's like the higher expression of the personality. So the personality would be on the lower level of of who we are. So as we evolve ourselves, as we develop ourselves through spirituality and consciousness expansion, we elevate ourselves through those layers. So we peel off the layers of our personality, all the beliefs, all the programming that people and the world has put on us, to come to who we really are, which is our soul expression. And our mind, our ego, it goes through a similar process, starting with our ego and then going up, 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 all the way until you are able to operate fully through your higher self, which is a higher expression of your mind. So that's the way I understand the ego and the soul, or the higher self and the soul. It's kind of like different layers of who we are. And I mean, I wouldn't say like the soul is the end, because it's like an infinite game. There's
Yeah.
so many layers. You'll be peeling it for the rest of your life. You might not even get to it, but you can get close to it, and or at least see who you really are, peek through, and then that gives you a little bit more encouragement to keep going.
I do like positive, kind of encouraging, not necessarily spiritually bypassing, but positive, like perspectives or attitudes about this. Now, maybe though, there's a shadow side of my perspective, and that on one hand, yes, if you're attacking the ego and saying, you're not going to have a choice, and it'll be great because by not having a choice and giving your choice to God, God will decide everything perfectly for you anyways. Just let everything be done by God. You might not like that. So, but this other perspective, if I don't like it, is, or someone doesn't like it, is like, what if you might say, no, I'm God already, I'm source already. Like, why, that reaction saying, I'm the one already. Ego is an illusion anyway. So why do I need to attack those programs and hurt myself in the process? But what if that itself is a sort of reaction? We're like, well, it's like defensive. So there's a pain at the idea of not having control of source of anything, not having control, right? And even if it's source, there's a fear of source. Because if you identify with separateness, you're afraid of losing control. Because control is everything when you're separate. Because if you don't have control, you could die and then or be a slave or something. So it's almost like a fear of almost being a slave of God. I do think that's what the ego has. And the fact I've had dreams that have indicated this. My ego, my subconscious has indicated to me very clearly, what if it's a trick? What if it's just like extraterrestrials or like negative beings, or just somehow it's trick, and then you let yourself go to spirituality, and then it's like it's too late, you're in the trap, and then you're doomed, and then you suffer for eternity, or you're dead, and it's just like, oh no, you should have been more cautious, you shouldn't have just thrown cautious to win and jumped in, let's be careful here, that's a sort of vibe I've been getting through some of my dreams and stuff like that. And I realized that, yeah, there's a part of us that's like, I don't want to. When someone says, "Oh, yeah, you're just gonna surrender to God," why don't you just let go and let God take control, or let Source get control? It's almost like, so I just you'd reflect on when parents were telling you what to do and you didn't get a choice. When you're at school and it was really shit because you had to do what you're told and you didn't really have a choice. And it's like, so I need to go back to that now. And it's not true. But I think that there's a balance here, because you don't want to, if you're just provoking fear in your ego by being like, right, well, I'm just going to go with whatever Source says. Okay, what is Source telling me to do? I need to do that now because the Source says that. Like even last year, I just guilt-based, fear-based pursuit of trying to do the right thing, trying to be pure, trying to cut out foods, certain foods, and try to cut down, do a dopamine detox. And it really impacted my mental health. Like I felt terrible. I was like, it decreased. It's like it temporarily decreased my frequency or something.
Mhm.
I don't know. I got through it and I learned through the whole experience. But on the other, okay, it's like in the occult from some research and in spirituality in general, there's duality and then there's balance. And balance, the heart is all about balance and harmony, right? You know, I thought I was interviewing you, but never mind that.
I'm loving it. Keep going.
There you go, being a critic. So, so yeah, actually, when we get triggered by someone in spirituality or anything else, that's a perfect opportunity, isn't it? Um, so I guess there's another way to look at surrender, I think, that I like, that resonates with me, that feels good. And that is that I'm not, I never was this identity. This is like method acting, and you forget who you are, and you're like, okay, wait. And from what I've heard, there's a spiritual teacher, Helen Hamilton, I follow. And what she says and what others have said is that when you have that realization, it's a realization that you are it all anyway, that the separation isn't there, like an experiential realization of that. Now I know intellectually, I don't, um, but it's that actual experience. So it's like we don't need to be giving it all up. Like, I mean, like, we don't need to. It's not like there's one thing you're meant to be doing. There's this one path. You do this, you do that, you do that, you do that. You open, you intuitively hone into what the thing you need to do at every moment is, and then you obey every single thing, and you follow that line forever, and that's your best perfect timeline. And into for any moment you don't do that exact thing, you're missing the mark, and it's
Mhm.
less than the perfect timeline you should be on. And oh wow, why aren't you listening to God? How could you? So it's like I don't know, like maybe the person wasn't saying that, but that's how it. I don't know, like if we can just
And
relax. I
I
kind of feel like there's a
feel,
bandwidth
yeah,
of choice, and we don't have choice when we're an ego because we're actually unconsciously following stuff.
that's a really good word, unconsciously. So the way I look at it is from a more self-empowered place where it's not God or creation or source has this particular plan for us and we must follow it to a T. I believe that we are co-creating with source. So what that means is that we do have a divine plan, a divine blueprint of what we're meant to do. How we express that and the how that we create that is really up to us, which is a form of free will. So for example, for me, music, right, would be one of the major paths that I like part of my divine blueprint. But how I want to bring that through, how I want to create it, what actions I want to do is really up to me as an individual to choose. So I want to share music, like singing songs, and I want to put it on YouTube. And that's my choice. You know, Source never said you have to do this. Nobody whispered in my ear and said, tomorrow you need to sing this song and title it this way and put it out at this time. I choose all of those things to express that. Um, And even like with writing, I'll write something, but it's like what I really, really want to do. And it's in line with what I want to teach, which is spirituality, creativity, consciousness. So you have this like really, really wide path. And that's the path that you're supposed to be on. And how you want to navigate through that path is completely up to you. So you work with source, you create with source, and it's like this beautiful dance that you do together.
I like that explanation. I'm wondering though, what do we do when we notice ego sneaking in and control sneaking in?
I think for me, when I notice that, I have a conversation with my ego. I'll be like, okay, well, why are you thinking that? What is it that you want to share with me, to show me? So a lot of times I'll feel fear come up, or I'll have a very negative thought that comes up, and I'll be like, okay, well, why are we thinking about this? Like, what is it that you want to communicate with me? Think of the ego like a child, right? So I don't have kids, so I am just using
Inner
this as
child?
an analogy. Pardon me?
Is that the inner child?
Yes, sir. Yes, your inner child. Exactly. So think of your ego like the inner child, and your child is always throwing a tantrum, making requests, asking for things. It doesn't mean that what the child is asking for is irrelevant or has no value or no meaning behind it, but it's just not being expressed in the highest form. So you, as the parent, would have to speak with your child, the inner child, and ask, okay, if you're having fear come up over this particular thing, or if you really, really want this particular, like a big house in life, what is the actual underlying reason for that? What is the underlying motivation? And when you can identify that, then as an adult, you can choose a more healthy form of expression for that thing. So, an example, if I wanted a gigantic mansion, it's probably because I don't know, I guess I want to elevate my sense of self worth. Now, as an adult, I can look at myself and say, well, is there another way I can elevate my sense of self worth that is a lot more healthier for me? And it could be, well, maybe if I produce work in alignment to what I'm actually here to do on that path that I'm supposed to create with source, maybe music, people are going to appreciate that work, be affected by it in a positive way. And that response I get from people will elevate my sense of self-worth. So I work with my ego in that way instead of squash it, because it does bring value to our life in some way. We just have to recognize what it is.
It shows us what we need to heal, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Once I was half asleep and I was lying there, and I get this half asleep clairvoyance thing very often, where I see writing or images like when I'm half asleep, and like it was it was phrased in a childlike way, but expressing with words like basically lust. Let me put it that way. And this is at a point where I was trying to like not be so let go of my attachment to, to that, right? Um, and basically it was telling me what it wanted, but I got paranoid that it was like some sort of, I don't know, demonic trick, or some sort of like negative, or my shadow being mean to me, or something, um or some sort of warning that, um because it's a little bit disturbing because it was in childlike language about wanting, like what this, that, and the other. So, but now I realize that it's like it's not even. It was just expressing. Look, this is how I want to cope, and I don't know what to do, and I'm hurting, and I haven't had my outlet. I'm cold turkey. So please, it's basically asking for candy, but the candy was, it was something else. You know exactly what it is. So. And
Yeah.
that's an example where now I know that actually, if I could give love to myself whenever I have these anything like that, or actually I do that when I actually am talking to my inner child or an inner child aspect, and I'm being really saying really kind, encouraging words, I feel this glowing feeling in my heart, and I feel wonderful. So,
That's really beautiful. I think you pointed out something really important, which is that every part of ourselves, even our shadow part, our ego, however you want to label it, it really just wants to express itself. And the more we try to suppress it, the worse it gets, the louder it screams and the more violent it becomes, right? So and this is also true for our emotions. We're not a species that is very comfortable with expressing our emotions as well as our thoughts, our desires, our wants. We contain all of that inside of us. And when it builds up to a certain point, it can come out in a very detrimental way. And all that it wants to do is just to express itself, like you said. And we just have to find a healthy way to allow for that to come through. And all sometimes we need to do is just acknowledge it, to listen to it, to figure out, hear the message, hear what it wants to communicate with us, and then it'll disappear. Simple as that.
I just had to start. I just got amused. I had this thought saying, "I don't want to disappear."
Yes, and you know why? Because I think perhaps to attack the ego and all that, there also the concept of like ego death. Nothing wants to die. Everything is conscious and everything wants to keep surviving, right? So I think part of the reaction that the ego might bring is because it's afraid of being killed.
Does it
And
really?
that's
What is the death? What is death anyway?
what is death, right? But I mean, in the greater and grander scheme of things, there really isn't death, right? It's
No,
all, yeah,
I've
it's
got a more
all,
particular question, and I haven't talked to anyone else about it, but I've been
Mhm.
wondering, like the essence of consciousness that makes up, let's say, an aspect of subconscious or consciousness, when it undergoes ego death, does it poof gone, and then that bit of egoic awareness dies permanently, and its consciousness blacked out forever, or does it like transmute or transform into a healed a healed aspect of consciousness, and while integrating with the larger, you know, consciousness? Like, sounds like a loaded question, honestly, but
no, I think you answered yourself. Integration. That's exactly what it is. So I think my understanding is that the ego and all of us are like fragmentation of that one unified consciousness that we call source, God, creation. So you and I are a part of that, right? And I guess when we die, all of that just kind of comes right back to that one source. But in the meantime, you and I, we don't want to die. We want to keep living for as long as we can. And this is true for everything that is conscious, including our ego, including our shadow self. It wants to survive as its own unique thing. But I think that even for us as individuals, we have so many fragments and pieces of who we are. And in our spiritual development, it's a process to unify, to integrate all of that internally, and so that we can express the most complete version of who we are.
like I'm trying not to just jump in immediately with an egoic sort of answer. Maybe I'm being controlled here unnecessarily. It's just,
Well, you can share what you're thinking. We can like explore that. So what's your initial thought? You can, it's
I
okay.
forgot. I had a thought. It was about, do you have an influence or like a culture, whether in your life, past life, like is Native American sort of culture an influence in any way in what you do, or is there any other influences on Earth, ancestrally, extraterrestrially, or what?
I would say for me, I am very drawn to nature. So what's natural. So I guess the closest culture that would practice that would be the indigenous Native American tribal culture that because they're very in tuned with nature, with the land, with with the spirit of that comes through all of that stuff. So I would say that, but I'm also very like when I was younger, I used to look up into the sky at the night in the night and just like really love the stars and feel that was what was home to me. And I hated being on planet Earth. It felt like I was just out, not in my element here at all. So I think yeah, I guess for me, both cosmic and both land, earth.
Something that comes to mind here, it's something where you go slightly critical people like this who believe this, but I guess I project. But there's this thing that I've noticed with, you get it with people like David Icke followers, and you get it with Gnostics, new Gnostics, the Gnostics you get these days. And it's this very, I've noticed it seems almost like it's fear based, and it's a sort of, it's all about escaping this prison planet, or this escaping and going back to source, and then it's over, and then the nightmare's over sort of attitude. Um, Without just rejecting it, um, like how do we? What's your response to more perspective on that sort of thing?
Well, I also noticed that too. There's a lot of there even in spirituality, there's a lot of escapism. And the truth behind that is that there's so much pain, and pain is something so hard to deal with, to look at, to feel through us. We don't want it. It's disgusting. It's dirty. It's ugly. We want to like be partying with the unicorns and the rainbows, sliding on the rainbows, right?
That sounds great.
We
We
don't
will
want
be
to look,
eventually.
yeah,
We will be. New Earth has loads of unicorns.
right. Exactly. So we want to do that and we don't because it's more fun, it's beautiful, it's pleasant. We don't want to look at all the pain, the suffering, deal with the problems that we have as human beings on earth because it's hard work. It's unpleasant. But out of all the places that we could be, we chose to be here. There's a reason. We might not remember it right now, but there's a good reason why, of all the places you and I and everybody else chose to be here. And to want to escape from that means it's kind of like, if you have house chores, you don't want to take out the garbage, you don't want to clean the toilet. But if you don't do that, you think that problem's going to go away? You think the garbage is just going to disappear by itself or the toilet's going to clean itself? No, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And we actually have to do the work. I think to acknowledge that it is painful, to be compassionate with ourselves, to realize, it's very hard to face our fears, face our problems, but that it is also very needed. Would probably be a better approach than to run away. I think also there's kind of along the lines of escapism, there's also a lot of addiction, right? Addiction could be
Oh, yeah.
TV, could be food, could be shopping. It doesn't have to be hard drugs or alcohol. But what does that actually do? It's to numb the pain that we don't want to feel. It's to, when we watch TV shows or movies all the time, it's so that we don't have to look at our reality and see the horror that is actually really unfolding in front of our eyes, rather to believe in this illusion, this little fantasy that's so much more pleasant, right? And I wouldn't say like all of that is bad. It's okay to like, find some help to cope with the problems, but in the end, we really do need to address these things and deal with it to heal the wounds and to nurse the pain. That's the only way out of it. We can't escape this prison planet without doing that.
There's an interesting dance I play with myself where I have been letting go of things. I use David Hawkins' letting go method. At least my interpretation of it. It seems to work. I do. I've been cutting certain things out of my life gradually and shifting to where I feel peace more, which is meditating quite a lot and doing what I love, discovering what I love and what I really want, because that's not easy. You don't necessarily know what you want. And shifting more towards that, that's a healthy expression, but at the same time joyful or pleasant or positive. On the other hand, there's this you could push away the addiction itself and the emotions that addiction is. You can push away the very part of you that is reaching for the addictions. And that itself can be another kind of imbalance. Now, I'm not going to say you can't. Some people, do seem to be able to make progress with a more aesthetic approach. It doesn't necessarily work for everyone, though, and so we need to find a balance here. I guess the Buddha called it the middle way. I don't know, but it's not like you can't say, okay, this is the balance, this is the rule, or this is what I. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to feel it out and discover it yourself, and you might go through this sort of pendulum roller coaster of like between extremes. Yeah, so that's something I've been discovering for myself, is that I don't want it to be like, right, this thing banned from banned. From now on, I'm like this. But then I've noticed as well, like for example, I went through a period where I was smoking, and when I finally quit, there was no willpower involved. I just stopped. I was like, okay, so there's allowing even your own addiction in a healthy way, and then there's a more sort of, no, fuck it, fuck yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh great, oh. Um, I guess Eckhart Tolle says this, that you can delay it rather than delayed gratification is the thing. And with anything, with any duality in our life, we can consciously integrate it. We can integrate it together into a balanced into a balance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so all of these habits that we have that are so-called unhealthy that we're trying to get rid of, think of it more like it's there to fill in something that is missing within you, right? So to rip it out, you're going to have this gaping hole inside of you. And that's going to either attract something else to fill that hole that's equally unhealthy, or it's going to cause tremendous pain and suffering. So a healthier way to do it is to do it in steps and in progress. Think of like taking training wheels off of your bike. You don't just like go from a tricycle to a two-wheeler bike. There's like stages you go through, and it's about easing yourself through it. I think that any extreme practices usually don't work out because that approach is not people don't take into consideration the underlying needs that need to be addressed. So even like with smoking, there's a reason why people smoke. So what is the actual problem? Whatever it is, like you don't have to rip out the smoking right off the bat. You do it in stages. Okay, well maybe this week we're going to only smoke 5 days out of the 7 instead of 7 days. And then, in a month later, we're going to narrow it down to 3 days out of the 7 days. And then you work your way so that it's not so hard on the body and it's not so going to evoke so much pain. So it makes it a lot more successful for you to actually eliminate those things out of your life.
What about people who are already conditioned to being hard on themselves? Like I don't. I'm going to be generalizing a bit. Forgive me for this, but especially, I mean, actually, you get this men and women. A lot of people with, let's say, going to the gym, they want to maintain a trim figure, abs or whatever, and they feel like socially pressured to do that, and they'll be rejected by their peers or by the opposite sex or same sex, whatever, if if they don't maintain at a certain point, and they regularly force themselves to do it. Uh, and they're so used to forcing themselves to do it, that's almost part of who they are, or their identity anyway. I'm coming from a place of someone who is like, it's almost like I've always been bad at forcing myself. I was like worse at forcing myself than everyone else. And then I thought I was failing at life because I wasn't forcing myself to do work I hated. But other people, their life path seems to take them in a direction where maybe they have a midlife crisis. They're like, okay, what am I doing with my life, doing this 9 to 5 or 9 to 8, whatever it is that I hate? And it's not fulfilling. And I keep going to the gym like after work and to make sure I'm in a good state. Otherwise, I'll be unattractive. And they do all of these things. How do they let go of that when they're already doing all these things in such an ingrained way where it's like, they'll hate me, or I'll be ugly, or I'll lose my job, or how will I get by without the income from this job I hate?
I think we have a natural tendency to compare ourselves to others, but to realize that the only one we ever really need to compare ourselves to is ourselves, our older version of ourselves. So it's not so much like, oh, I need to get into this physical shape so that I look just like those people, or just like the people I see on magazines or on TV's actors and actresses. But to look at yourself, even take a picture of yourself and say, okay, well, right now I look like this. What is a healthy, ideal way or goal for me to work towards? Not to compare myself to my friend who just has different genetics, but for me, my body, my type, my genetics, what is reasonable? Because in the end, it's never about comparing ourselves to other people. We are conditioned to do that. I do that all the time. I look at other people and be like, oh, I don't look like that. I don't have their life. I don't have those experiences. Why am I like being punished or suffering this way? But when I look at my own life and how far I've gone and the development that I've had, it's different. I know that I've like done so many amazing things, but I don't recognize it if I'm comparing myself constantly to other people.
Yeah, and another thing I thought of as about it personally is gratitude is amazing. You can actually, especially if you combine it with like high vibe music or whatever, you do a little gratitude spree, right? Really focusing on an outcome so far, and you think about where you were a year ago, 5 years ago. Now, if you're watching this, you may well be into spirituality. Now, maybe you're completely new to it, but even if it's been, I don't know, a month, you might, if you've been meditating for at least a month, you might notice a change, that your life, that you've made progress, that you're on a trajectory that's improving. Well, I mean, you might have the dark night of the soul sort of experience, so that might be difficult. But even then, you might notice how there's things in the past that you're more self-aware now, or you don't beat yourself up as much, or something. Just a little bit more peace than there was, and that is something to really appreciate. And you feel really good if you focus on like how you have it good and how you have it better than you did, and how you are happier and more aligned with who you want to be.
Absolutely. And it's hard for us to recognize those things about ourselves because we're the ones living our life every day and we see ourselves in the mirror every day. Any sort of changes, we don't see that, right? It's hard to notice those things when we're living in it. But what I think is really good is if we, for example, if someone journals, you can read your journal art entry today compared to what you wrote a year ago, 5 years ago, and you'll be able to see because the evidence is right in front of you, and you can compare, the difference in the way you think, the way you feel, the way you look, if you have photos, and you can see the improvement that you made, so you can actually begin to have gratitude and compassion for yourself and appreciate the journey that you've been on.
Yeah. And I think just what makes you, or not makes you, what activity brings joy to you, even a little bit of joy. Um, can you not capture that feeling? Can you take note of that and bring that forth with or without whatever triggers it? Like I've got a playlist of music I love, and it's I add stuff to it, but I listen to lovely music. That's
Thank you.
one of the things. And now I've discovered that, or give yourself permission to do what you love. Yeah. Is there anything about light language that you'd like to share from your experience?
Sure. I want to mention that sound is very powerful. Um, and be very mindful of what you allow into your space, not just through, the people that you spend your time with or what you watch, but also music that you listen to and what you read and consume, because everything is frequency, right? Everything is energy, and we are energetic beings. So that impacts us in very subtle ways that we don't realize, but it's also very profound. So light language is all about how sound impacts us if we do it vocally through singing or speaking, but you can also write it like you do. You can also sign it and do body movements like through dance. But just know that sound, energy, and light are very powerful things, and they can do like wonders for you in your development, and to use it that way.
I have a question. This is more of a personal one, but it might benefit someone. Because I'm aware that, I used to watch violent shows like anime, stuff like that, until very recently. And like, let's say last night, I decided, you know what, there's this thing I like, I want to watch it, it looks really interesting. But it's got violence in it. So I watched it, and I had violent dreams last night. So I was like, oh. Now, maybe I probably can transmute it, but still, like, but on the other hand, I feel like, what if, what's the difference between shadow work and exposure to something lower frequency? Is it perhaps different when it's coming from what's within you already? Um, is giving, is communicating or giving a voice or something to the negative, the density within you, different from just exposing yourself to density? Yeah.
I think it's related because the question is like, how did that density, that darkness find its way into you in the first place? Did you put it in there yourself? Did you subconsciously allow it in there? Did you watch something and that ended up putting it into you in some way? Did you listen to something? Did you read something? Did someone say something to you and you openly received it? I think we as human beings are very we're always like we're easily hypnotized, and we in that state, we receive everything without even knowing it. We're unconscious, but when you become a conscious being, it's different. You can somewhat kind of control that and what you allow into your space. But I think it's related. So some of the stuff that is in us, I always wonder, I ask myself, and I don't have all the answers. I'll be like, okay, well, how did this darkness end up in me anyways? Who put it in there?
So how much of it is like childhood trauma, wounds, ancestral trauma, past life trauma? And how much of it is, well, last week, I watched wrestling, or I watched this violent mafia film, and like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, I can't watch that kind of stuff anymore because I'm extremely sensitive even more now than ever. And if I watch those things, I will have nightmares just like you. And I'll feel just very off. I'll feel like my energy's just all these emotions and I just feel I'm not myself, right? So I know that about myself. So I'm not going to subject myself to that kind of torture. But um, you know, uh I think that if you enjoy that stuff, well, you can do it, just stay alert and make sure you're conscious and that you're in your body and you're well aware of what it's trying to put into your very opened mind. Um, and so that's the safest way to do it.
Yeah, I think that's quite a mature perspective. Well, what is mature really? You know, being an adult, you know, with a job. And what is what is maturity from your current perspective?
I think maturity is personally, I think is when you know who you are and you're embodied, you've embodied your soul. So then you can make your own choices and you make your own decisions and you're not so easily influenced by outside sources because you're very, very confident and firm in who you are and what you're here to do. And the choices that you make are yours.
Is it possible for something you feel you enjoy? And I don't mean enjoy like, oh yeah, I watched this like violent thing I used to like a lot of a violent computer game or something, and it's kind of enjoyable, but it kind of feels kind of off. But meh. No, I mean like enjoy like this creative passion, like light language for you or something. If you enjoy it, like I lost track of my question. So if I enjoy it, but it's from a, but it's not necessarily aligned with your expectations of what's spiritual.
Mm.
I lost track of my question, sorry. But like, yeah.
I guess I can, well, sort of like add a comment to what I think you wanted to say there. What is spiritual though? Is it like meditating, eating like a plant-based diet? Is it, I don't know, not only listening to a certain type of music, instrumental bells? Can you be spiritual and listen to rap and rock and all that other stuff? Can you go eat a hamburger and still be spiritual? The answer is yes. Spirituality isn't defined a certain way. It's really just a relationship you have with yourself. And if you like those things, okay, we'll enjoy it. We're here living this life, having this physical experience. If you really like those things, why not go enjoy it? What's wrong with that? As long as, again, you know who you are, you're conscious, you're in your body, and the choices that you make are fully yours, I say go for it.
And if you have like a like, what if you have a life purpose, like a
Mhm.
sort of way of serving humanity? That when you might be do creating something for people who are not spiritually awakened or anything, that might have some density in it, but it may well be like it's like imagine someone's writing a book and they write a fantasy book, like like if Tolkien was alive now and he was writing Lord of the Rings, well, they, you know, they're killing orcs and the dark things happen in it, right? You say, oh no, no, you shouldn't write that. Nah, nah, nah. I would lower people's frequency, you know.
Well, sort of like what we mentioned earlier is that everything comes from source, right? So even when we talk about darkness, violence, and all that, I think there's a tendency for, quote, spiritual people to ignore all of that and turn a blind eye to it, even though it exists. You know, it's real. There is evil in the world. We have to acknowledge that. And then we can make decisions and do things, create things that can help balance that out more so that it's not predominantly what we have and experience. So I think it's okay to, you know, create things that might be so-called dense, but to always have an intention and a purpose to why you want to engage in that, why you want to create that. Is it to bring awareness? Because that's important. I think we need to know these things. But if you're just trying to create fear in people and to manipulate others through that, then I think that might not be the best option.
Right. And what if you know you've made a mistake? Suppose you make a mistake. Let's say, you know, a family member says something that just the perfect thing to piss you off, and you could not explode or not react negatively, but you do, and you know you've done it, and you're like, oh, fuck, that was
Happens.
unspiritual of me. I missed the mark. I'm on the negative timeline now. Oh, it's done for.
I actually I laugh because like we all do that. We all think of those things, right? And it's in the grander scheme, it's really silly. I would say we as human beings, we need to definitely find more compassion for ourselves. You know, you can't we don't make one we don't take one action or make one mistake and then we sabotage our ability to go into 5D. It doesn't quite work that way. It's a continuous journey, right? So if we make a mistake, well, hopefully from that mistake, you now have gained awareness to how you react to something and you know what the trigger was. And then you know for next time if that trigger comes up again, you're like, ha, I remember you. I know what this is and I know how I used to respond. Perhaps now I'm smarter because of what happened last time and I'm not going to respond that way. Instead, I'm going to give a nice big smile and a nice big hug to the other person. And that's how you grow and that's how you change and that's how you use these experiences for your own benefit.
And another way of looking at it is life is like a role-playing game, or it pretty much is, right? And in a game, sometimes you make mistakes because you're not a perfect player right at the beginning. You don't go, oh my God, why did I do that? You know, I should have jumped over, you know, Mario at that point, and then he wouldn't have killed me. And oh no. Like you in a game, when you're playing a game that you at least that you know it's a game anyway, um, you're not necessarily that harsh with yourself. But with reality, you're like, oh no, this is deadly serious. And I messed up. Because the programming says, well, you know, you've got memories or experiences, some trauma of your parents or school teachers, like, now, you shouldn't have done that. That was very bad of you. And you're like, oh no, because you feel like basically God's rejected you or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
I think why don't we remember that life is actually a game that we're playing, just like you described. It's in some way it actually is true. But what happens is that this whole experience is so immersive that it's like watching a really, really good movie. You become the characters that you
yeah.
forget. Oh, wait a minute, this isn't real. I'm here actually to do these things, to learn, to realize these things. And this is actually what the real purpose and goal is. So we're so absorbed into this experience that it becomes our reality. And as a result of that, we're so hard on ourselves. We don't realize it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to, do something so-called wrong, as long as you learn from it. it's okay.
Yeah, because awareness is the key, not you, there's this left brain set of rules that we follow, and then we're good. If we don't follow the rules, then we're bad. Because we all know, right? Well, like there's this idea, the devilish thing to do is like you do the bad things that you want to do, and the good thing to do is you stop yourself from doing the bad things. So you don't kill people because even though you want to, because it's wrong. It's like what? I don't want to kill people, and if I do, that part of me's wounded isn't really me. Actually, bring consciousness to the density. Um, and so that harshness, it's a wound, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Um, it's like that inner critique, right? That we just likes to hammer. It's almost like I think it's actually an addiction. You know, we have this addiction within ourselves that we love to just create more pain. It's like that something about that pain that we just love. Even though we think we hate it, it's like we create more of it for ourselves in some weird, twisted way. And when we become aware of that, we start to let that go, and we stop like purposely saying things, our entire internal dialogue that just like pushes ourselves into this like deep dark place, and change that to maybe uplift ourselves instead.
Plus that energy of self-criticism, it's the same energy of criticizing others and being aggressive or mean to others. Because happy people don't, they're not mean. Now some people they present because people present it like they've got this perfect life, and then they act narcissistic. You know, like oh my god, so these people they love themselves, they do the best. Like they don't love themselves. Um,
Totally. It's so deceiving. Like, I mean, I'll put my hand up immediately and I'll admit that I've been deceived so many times where people put on this image and sell you a story and we buy into it without thinking. And then later on we realize, oh my gosh, I was like totally fooled. Or
and that's okay, I guess. It's all part of the journey. So I feel like perhaps we can round this up. But is there anything you'd like to say or share before we do so?
not so much just if people want to listen to some of my music, they can find it on my channel under my name, Viccy Lynn Chan. And just remember that everything starts from here, your heart, to find compassion for yourself, for others, for your experience in life, and that everything is there's a purpose to everything. We just have to find it.
And it's in here. If you can see my
Yeah.
hand. So yeah, without further ado, have a lovely day or a lovely evening, and bye for now.